Today I'm going to be discussing how the 2014 Honda Civic Si does in the performance category, and we're going to talk about all the performance aspects such as the clutch, the brakes, the power, the steering, the suspension, and even the tires a little bit. So first we're going to talk about the clutch, and actually first let's talk about what kind of car is the Civic Si. It's not a sports car, but it's a performance-oriented car, and the reason I say that is it's still a Civic, which isn't bad by any means, but it wasn't built to be a sports car, but it does have performance aspects. It has a larger engine than a Civic. It comes with the manual transmission only. It comes with wider tires than a Civic, bigger brakes. It even has shift indicator lights and a spoiler on the back. It's definitely meant to be performance oriented. So even though I'm going to be comparing it to other cars, you may or may not think that they're fair comparisons, but no matter how you cut this car was supposed to be performance oriented, so that's what I'm going to be going with based off of my comparisons. And just so that everyone knows, my job is I manage the inventory at a Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche dealership, and I also work at a BMW dealership part-time. So I've driven a lot of cars. I've driven everything in the VW, Audi, Porsche, and BMW lineup, as well as most of the trade-ins that we get at the dealership. So I've driven a lot of cars, and I have a pretty good basis on what to compare things to. So starting with the Si in general, it's definitely a performance-oriented car. Like I said, all the pedals have a really short travel to them, which is a good thing, so that your response, it's more immediate. It's not like a long pedal travel. And first we'll start out talking about the clutch. It's definitely on the lighter side, but it's not the lightest out there. It has a decent resistance to it, but it's not so bad that you wouldn't want to drive in traffic with it. It's still pretty much on the light side, but I think that maybe the Scion FRS and Subaru BRZ, they probably have a lighter clutch, as well as most cars by Volkswagen. Their clutches are on the lighter side. But it's nowhere near as heavy as, say, like a Mini Cooper or a Porsche. Those are really heavy clutches. This one, it's light with just a little bit of resistance, and that's how I like it. You have a little bit of feel. It doesn't feel like artificially light. And the engagement point on it, it feels like it's just above the halfway point of the travel. It's definitely a little bit on the high side, but apparently that's so that you have quicker shifts. But it's a little bit more annoying in traffic that you have to let the pedal out further, but it's really not a huge deal, and you get used to it pretty quickly. Next we'll talk about the brakes. Again, the pedal travel on it is short, so that when you touch the brakes, they go on. It's not like normal mid-sized family sedan where the pedal travel is longer and the brakes are gradual. In this, you feel them right away. And I believe from 60 miles per hour, Motor Trend got the car to stop in 110 feet, which is pretty good. 120 and above is considered average, 110 feet is good, and around 100, that's pretty much considered excellent. So those are the brakes. I really can't comment on if they fade or not, because I don't take my car to the track, but my guess is they will. They're just normal pads. They're not meant for racing or anything like that. And the rotors, they're vented up front and solid in the back. And they're slightly larger than a normal Civic. On this car, the smallest wheels that you can fit is a 16-inch wheel. And on a normal Civic, I believe you could go down to 15 inches. So we do get larger rotors and brakes on this car. next, let's talk about the suspension. And I'm a little bit torn on how to describe this because, again, it's not a sports car, it's just a performance-oriented car. But more or less, there's still a pretty good amount of body roll in this. And that's just how SIs have always been. And for 2014, it's better than it ever has been in terms of staying flat in the corners. But there's also trade-offs with that. For example, if it's flat in the corners, you usually don't have a comfortable ride. And if you have body roll, the ride's usually more comfortable because it's a softer suspension. But for example, when I work at BMW, there's a turnaround that you have to take to get back to the other side of the road, because in New Jersey you usually can't turn left, you have to go around to the right to make a left. So in a BMW X3, I could, which is their small SUV, I could comfortably take that around 38 miles per hour and have almost no body roll. Yet whenever I try and take in the Civic, once I get to like 33, 34 miles per hour, there's a lot of body roll. I'm like leaning into the door, and the car just doesn't feel comfortable trying to do it. So that's just a thing. Like the BMW X3, it's a BMW, but it's also not a sports car, and it could take it at a much more comfortably at that rate of speed. So while the SI is good, it's not like the best out there in terms of suspension. And again, I know it's not a sports car, but I still feel like it should be able to do a little bit better. And I guess next we'll talk about the tires. Right now on the highway, you hear them a little bit, but it's pretty quiet. And they're Continental Conti Pro Contacts all-season tires. And for the most part, they're pretty good. Never really had any traction issues with them. The only thing that I know of is the tread life on them sucks. My friend has them on a normal Civic EX. This was shot around 25,000 miles, and that seems to be around the general consensus on how long these last. So my car I have at least for 3 years. I'm probably going to have to get new tires somewhere in the middle of that, which is just an added expense that you don't get with most cars, but with this car you'll probably have it. And next we'll touch on the steering. The steering wheel itself, it's small. That's good. It's easy to hold and grab. But it communicates very little with you. You really don't feel what's going on with the road. And the steering, it's on the light side. It's definitely very heavily assisted. And again, they could turn down the assistance and have a really heavy steering wheel, but that's really not going to give you any more feel anyway. It's just going to be like an artificial thing. So either way, it's just how the steering's set up. It's not the best in the world, but the steering response is very quick. As soon as you do something on the wheel, the car does it. And it's just overall a decent steering system. It's nothing fantastic. And I guess lastly, we'll move on to the transmission, then we'll talk about the acceleration. The transmission, it's excellent. It's just, the throws, they're very short, and they're not as short as, say, the Subaru BRZ and Scion FRS. Those are extremely short, but this is definitely on the short side, kind of like the new Volkswagen GTI. The older MK6s, they were somewhat long. The new MK7s, they're pretty much excellent. And this one, it's very precise. I've never missed a gear, and you just always know where it is. And I guess we'll talk about the power a little bit now. power. However, to get the power, you pretty much have to be above 3,500 RPMs. That's where the power starts to come on. So if you're taking it on or off ramp and you want to take it fast, you pretty much have to be in second or third gear. And again, that's not a bad thing, it's just where the power is. However, because of that you always have to be at higher RPM range, your gas mileage does suffer a little bit. But the power, it's good. It hits 60 in just over 6 seconds. I believe the published time is like 6.5. And yeah, it's slower than Volkswagen GTI, but again, I'm really not so sure these cars compete. You might cross-shop them, but in the end, the GTI, I think it's more performance-oriented than this car is. But that's just my opinion. And the power in this car, it's plenty. I mean, average cars, they probably hit 60 in like between 8 to 10 seconds. This one's in the low 6s to mid 6s. And then fast cars, let's say, they're usually the low 5s, and then you have supercars and all those that hit 60 in like 2 to 3 or 4 second range. So this car definitely has plenty of power around town. And overall, those are just my thoughts on how this car performs. It's not bad, it's not excellent, it's just it's a fun car, that's what it is. And that's also pretty much why I bought this car. I talked about it in my last video, but I was looking at other cars like the GTI and WRX, but in this car, you have the most amount of fun. The transmission's the best, you have the high revving engine, you have VTEC and all those things. So it's definitely a fun car, and especially for the price, you can't beat it. You got so many more features than you do standard in, say, the GTI. But for that, you're also losing performance a little bit. And basically, you're just gonna have to go out there and test drive them and see how you feel about the car. Personally, I love it so far. I've had it for almost exactly 3 months, and we're at 2,603 miles. There's been no issues with the car, which you shouldn't. It's a brand new car with only 3 months old, but sometimes new cars have issues. This one doesn't. And now we're in second gear, and I'll just let it go. So as you can see, you have the VTEC light and the shift indicator lights up on the left next to the speedometer. And I guess one other thing I didn't touch on this car is torque steer. There's a little bit, it's not horrible, it's definitely controllable, but it is there, and that's just going to be with any front wheel drive car that has a lot of power, so you really can't fault the car for that. It's just the design and how they are. Alright, so now I'm at where I'm going to be, and if I have any additional thoughts, I'll record them on the way back. So once we head back out onto the road, I'll start the video back up and I'll give you some additional thoughts. Okay guys, so now for just a few more additional thoughts. They're going to be mostly about the transmission, because I forgot to talk about a few things when I was talking about the transmission. But like I said, the throws are very short and the gears are very close together, left to right, and it's very smooth. It's not notchy, but it's very precise, which is a good thing in my opinion. So other than that, the gears themselves are long, meaning you can stay in a gear for a long time. However, the ratios, they feel like they're very close together. So, to me, there's not like a huge difference between, say, 5th and 6th gear, and that's also because they're more overdrive gears, but even between like 3rd and 4th gear or 2nd, there's not a huge difference. And you can see that because when you downshift, the revs, they don't like jump a huge amount. They're all very close to each other, the gears. And because of that, you can get up to 5th, 6th gear very quickly, which is good for fuel economy. However, as you saw earlier when I was on the highway, at 70 miles per hour in 6th gear, you're at 3,000 RPMs. Because of that, it is a little bit loud in the cabin, and your MPG does suffer a little bit. So you're better off in this car going, say, 50 miles per hour than 65, 70 miles per hour. And while it's like that in most cars, in this car, you actually notice the difference a lot more. That's only because the RPMs are so high in 6th gear. And other than that, rev matching, again, it's extremely easy, and that's because, like I said, the ratios are very close together. So 6th to 5th, there's barely anything. 5th to 4th, it's less than 1,000 RPM difference. And also, the Civic Si, it's well known for its rev hang. That really doesn't bother me too much because it allows you, when you're upshifting, you could upshift more leisurely because if the RPMs dropped right away and you don't shift quickly, then the RPMs are going to have to bounce back up and the car's going to lurch a little bit. So it does allow for a more relaxed driving style, and it's also just as good if you're trying to shift quickly. And it also makes rev matching a lot easier because when you put the clutch in, since your RPMs are going to stay there for just a little bit instead of drop right away, the rev match itself has to be smaller, so it's just easier to do. And that's pretty much my thoughts on the transmission and its ratios. It's very good. And the one last thing I want to talk about is the response of the gas pedal. How much does it respond to your inputs? This one, it's pretty good. So when you put the clutch in and you go to rev match, the RPMs, they move right away as soon as you put in the gas pedal. Now, it's nowhere near as responsive as, say, as a Porsche. It has to be as expected. This car, it's a Civic, it's only $23,000. So you can't expect the best from it. However, for this class, it's very good, the response. And it's much better than, say, any Volkswagen, even the GTI. And a lot of VWs, when you put in the clutch and you hit the gas to rev match, you pretty much have to like floor the gas pedal before it like even does anything. The response to them, it's very delayed and it's not that good. I mean, it's kind of easy to rev match on them. You put the clutch in, you kind of floor it, and from there they're in the right spot. But it's not the way it should be. It's not very driver oriented, where it's not doing exactly what you tell it to do. And in this car, it's a lot closer to doing what you tell it to do, which is a good thing. So right there, I barely tapped the gas and my RPMs jumped up as expected. In other cars, I really would have had to like mash the gas pedal just to get a few hundred RPM out of it before it did anything. So yeah, it's a very responsive car, which is good. The only thing I'd really like to see improved on it is the suspension, because honestly, if the suspension is being beat by most mid-size sedans and even SUVs, to me, it's not that great of a suspension. I mean, it's great for driving and going on long road trips and having comfortable passengers and soaking up the bumps, but it's not great for being performance oriented, which this car is. It's a performance-oriented car, whether it's a sports car or not. So I'd just like to see that improved a little bit more. But other than that, the Civic SI is great. I never thought I'd ever own a Honda. I've really never liked them or anything. But I went to test drive the SI and I fell in love with it instantly because it's just such a fun car to drive. And to me, that's more important than being the top handling car in its class. So again, like I said, I'm sacrificing a little bit of performance. If I wanted performance only, I would have went with a GTI or something similar. But I prefer to have the fun. This car's just a little bit more raw, and I get a lot more features for my money. And not to mention it, at least to lease it, it's extremely cheap compared to the other cars. So over a GTI, that would have cost me more than $100 more a month than this car. So I went with the Civic SI. It's a great car. I definitely recommend that you take a look at it.